All right. Hello and welcome to the Kansas City Virtual SQL Server User Group. Glad you could join us for our Lunch and Learn with Mikey Bronowski presenting Double Vision with Copilot, enhancing your code twice as fast. As we continue our AI in October, a couple reminders for Q&A, please put them in the chat and we will answer them at the end. And just a note, this session is recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube video channels shortly. And as usual, with our Lunch and Learns, we are going to jump right in. And with that, I'm going to let you take it away, Mikey.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. So let's start. So the Copilot thing is a hot thing this year, or maybe even 2 years now. Everyone has a Copilot, and I just wanted to talk about two tools from Microsoft that help you write code faster or work with development. A few words about me first. I'm Mikey Bronowski, and I live in Southampton in southern England. I also run the user group here in Southampton, and sometimes I present at various conferences. I will be, in a couple of weeks, I will be in Seattle at PASS Data Summit. So if anyone from this user group is coming, maybe we will have a chat. We'll have a chance to chat about stuff, data-related stuff. Okay, let's go to the main topic, the Bing code search. That is our main focus today. The Bing code search helps you find relevant code inside Visual Studio, and you can review that code and add this in the code editor. The main features, it's integrated in Visual Studio. It will match the context of your code. It will enhance your productivity, so you can quicker review and insert code, samples, snippets, and you have lots of sources of repositories like MSDN, Stack Overflow. And it also is integrated with Bing, the famous search from Microsoft. And this tool is coming in 2014, which is in the past. So yeah, that tool was already present in our life, in developers' lives, 10 years ago. So when we think about the Copilot stuff and the AI and all the tools that are helping developers, right now everyone is like, oh, it will get rid of the developers and it will replace them, or will help us write code quicker, because we never had a tool like that. 10 years ago, Microsoft had this offering. So now in 2024, we have the Copilots, which is GitHub Copilot. I want to talk about this a little bit, and also show you the Azure Copilot, which is not necessarily a development tool, but I will mention a few words about that. So what is the GitHub Copilot first? This is AI powered, like almost everything nowadays. You can have AI powered refrigerator, so why not the software IDE or any tool that helps you to write the code. It's a cooperation between GitHub and OpenAI. It will integrate with Visual Studio Code by extensions. There are 2 extensions you can use with the Visual Studio Code. And as the other tool, it will suggest code completions, generate some samples. It might even write the whole function for you if you ask, and is also context aware. So it will use the code you have in your editor to help you. So you don't have to work too hard to get this cooperating with you. Once you know the rules. this is the website, and this is the sample from Microsoft website, just a screenshot. And the cost, I admit I didn't check it this month, but last month I checked. It was the Copilot individual was $10 per month, and if you pay upfront for a year, it will be $100 US dollars. There are also offerings for like Copilot Business or Copilot Enterprise if you are one of the business owners or enterprise owners, and you want to add this offering to your team. You can also use Copilot in mobile app. This is a screenshot, real screenshot from my Android phone. So I can open a GitHub app on my phone and ask Copilot questions, which is great because this is another tool I use on my phone. I have ChatGPT for some stuff. I used to use them for code as well, but now I can use Copilot on my phone, which is great. I think the iPhone version is there as well. And in VS Code, we have two extensions. One is GitHub Copilot, and the other one is GitHub Copilot Chat. So the screenshots are already out of date because they change very quickly, but we will see them in real demo. And what are the benefits of using the Copilot, GitHub Copilot? Because the Copilot thing is almost everywhere. Microsoft has multiple Copilots across the offerings. So this is GitHub Copilot. And like I mentioned before, it will increase the coding speed or efficiency if you know what you're doing. And it's not that difficult, but it requires some training or some testing to get the proper questions, or a little patience, but it will be co-working with you. You can reduce the repetitive coding tasks as well. Let's say you want to generate some copies of the same block of code. You can ask the Copilot to do it for you. You can learn new things like new patterns, coding patterns, or new languages. One of the examples I have is the Google Script thing. I had a task to do something in Google Script. It's JavaScript-like language, and I didn't have time to go through the whole documentation. So I was working with GitHub Copilot to ask questions like, how do you start with Google Script? And start with the basic script, then start with the script to do a certain activity, certain task for me. So I did this all with the Copilot. Of course, I was watching what is the output. So it's not like you ask the question, it generates the script, and you just run the script. It helps if you spend some time to understand the output. So it's not like it's a malicious script or stuff like that. So, but I believe it's the same way when you go to online forum and you ask for some script, or you go to the forum and there's already a script. So you don't just apply that script blindly to your environment, because that might be a catastrophic thing. Usually the community will either downvote stuff like that, but sometimes the script might be harmful. So it's always good to double check. So the same works with the Copilot. Always check, always validate. If you are not sure, ask again, or maybe ask for the explanation. And the also important thing is it's the context aware. So if you have a code of your own and ask questions about that or some improvements, it will take into account your existing code, which is a challenge for the tools with the AI-powered tools, where people think like, oh, it should know what I'm thinking, but it doesn't know. It's like a blank carte blanche. It doesn't know what you have in your head. So it has to have some data. So, and I remember I had a discussion with someone who said, I asked the ChatGPT to create me a script of something, like a simple thing. And it created a script in Python, and they said like, oh, I want to just PowerShell. So the ChatGPT didn't know it's PowerShell. You have to specify first, because probably the most popular language, scripting language in ChatGPT was Python. So it was the obvious choice for the model. But with the context awareness, it will know like this is PowerShell code. So that person is asking about a solution in PowerShell, which is great. Okay, let's see GitHub Copilot in action. So I have a VS Code here. Let me just move this screen here. Hopefully it's big enough. And just close this one. Awesome. You can see already an output. So let me clear that out. So I have a and save. So let me close, open. This is the empty file. And with the Copilot on, I have this small icon here, show Copilot status. It's ready. I have these extensions, Copilot, GitHub Copilot here, GitHub Copilot chat is here. The main chat window is on the left. So it welcomes with, it's the new window. You can either open the chat in editor or new window, or have it here. Depends how you like to work. There are a few commands, so you can ask for help, and it will give you some macro functions, or some other things like that. So you have like a workspace, or explain, or do test, fix, new. I will show you this from the right-click context menu. You can also use this keywords like selection editor file, which will refer to a specific part of the VS Code. So let's first see how the tool works. So I have a comment. This is the PowerShell script. It's PS1, and I want to create a function to check if a number is a prime number in PowerShell. So I put the comment, then I hit enter, and just let me move this one. And this grayed out content is what GitHub Copilot proposes. When I hit tabulator, it will create a function. So I didn't write anything. I just asked the question as a comment, and it proposed the function. So now, if I want to check something, I can either ask the question, or when I when I put the enter in as a new line, it already proposed comment for me, or instruction. So I didn't even think about creating that now, but when I hit tab now, I put this instruction for Copilot. So I'm not doing like Control V from my other screen. It's everything in Copilot in VS Code. So this is the proposition: is prime 7? It's true. Is prime 10? It should be false. It's false. Of course, the function for primes, it's not that trivial for bigger numbers, so I cannot like start working with bigger numbers. But it's just the example for the possibility of this Copilot tool. and we can carry on, and it will give us more and more examples. We can also ask for, because it's PowerShell, we can also ask for create a pester test for the function. So again, I just put a few first letters of the word pester, and it completes that with pester test for the function. Okay, let's do that. Enter, let's wait. And here's our pester test. And not just one, but we have lots of other pester tests and explanations. So this is something like you would have to write this from scratch. If you are fluent with pester with PowerShell, that probably shouldn't be an issue. But if you are learning and you know, like I know what pester is, I know what PowerShell is, I just need to go back to the documentation, look it up, look up some examples, maybe go to a forum, get some snippet samples, and adjust to my needs. But with the Copilot, it will create this for you, so you don't have to do this by yourself. Okay, so let's clean up this bit here. And I mentioned a few macros. So when we have let's just leave the function here now. When you have the function, you can right click in the editor, and here's the context menu Copilot, and you can either do explain this or fix this if there's like a syntax issue. So we can try the syntax issue. Let's add maybe extra bracket here. So it didn't break. Let's do this. That should break. So it's not parsing. Let's do fix. And it will say that to fix the issue of the unexpected token, remove the extra closing curly brace at the end of the code block. We can see if it's okay. We can either discard if we are not happy with the answer, or we can accept that answer and see the syntax error is fixed. Now, the other thing we can do with that is, for example, let's do explain. So the explain goes to the left-hand side panel, and we have the explanation of each step from the function. So if you have a function and you inherit something, some code, because it's not always a new code we have at work. Sometimes you have a code from someone who was working there before you, and then that person no longer is with the company, and you have no one to ask, and you just don't know what's going on. And because that might be a bash, and you don't use bash, you use something else. Or maybe my example from Google Script, I don't know what it's doing. I can go to the documentation and spend time and try to understand. Or maybe we can ask Copilot and explain what are the bits of code. Some of them might be obvious, so you don't have to check everything, but sometimes maybe the whole function is more complex. So that's the explanation part. Now we can do generate docs. So everyone hates writing documentation, right? Oh, this is let's do discard because we put this in the wrong place. Generate docs. Oh, sweet. Once again, select the whole thing, and it will generate the documentation for you. So synopsis, description, parameters, if there are any parameters, maybe some examples. If you are happy with that description, with that documentation, you can add this. And then if you want to add more examples, maybe it will happily add more examples. This might be not very helpful, although it actually is different. So it returns true because 7 is a prime number, and it returns false because 8 is not a prime number. So maybe that's a good example. So there is no excuse now to not create documentation for your functions. I know you can always ask to the Copilot to explain, but for people who don't have Copilot, they cannot afford to pay for Copilot license. You can use that and generate the documentation and examples, so they don't have to, and it doesn't cost you much because you can do this from VS Code in a matter of seconds, and then just saying check that if that makes sense. Sometimes maybe you need some extra proofreading in case there is some extra stuff that are not necessarily needed, but from this description it looks okay. Cool. So that is the work with the editor and the context menu. You can also do, like, I have files here, and that was my original file. As you can see, my function is called test prime, and the original one a few months ago when I started creating this demo, it was called is prime. So the results might not always be the same. The code might be a bit different as well. And when we compare the codes, they are different. So it's not always the same, and it's worth to make sure the code does what we expect to what we expect from that code. I had one more scenario in my original file. I wanted to save that pester test, so create the pester test and save it as a file, because here I just created the pester test before, and because I'm optimizing my time, another word for being lazy, I want the code or Copilot to create the files for me. So I asked the Copilot to create the pester test and save it to a file. So it created this bit. So the whole pester test was saved as a variable, and then the Copilot generated this line. So when I ran this, it created the pester test for me in this location where that was the location. So not only writing the code, but you can also ask to help you to do some operations, like generate that code and save it for me, or generate the code that saves that code for me, which is great because it saves you time. You don't have to think about this now because it will just generate and save, generate and save. Awesome. Going back to the chat window, if I have, let's say, just let me check one bit. Yes, this function here. I had a function to get time info about the different countries, different cities as well. So also the function was generated by GitHub Copilot. Let me just move the bits here. Hopefully you can see. 1 second. The 3 cities, New York City, Southampton. Well, so it's not everything here. There were 3 cities. Oh, it's not showing the correct. Let me see if we can do this. Yeah, so it was 3 cities: New York and Jerusalem, Southampton, Jerusalem, New York, Southampton. So the differences between the cities and the town, that was all generated by Copilot, the function. And now I can ask the Copilot, so that's the function, and I can ask the Copilot either using I selected the code, or I can do editor and change Israel to for example Tokyo. I can use small letters, it should fix it. So we wait a couple of seconds, and this time the Copilot is being lazy. It just asked me to change this bits, add these two bits, but I can also ask recreate the whole function in editor for Tokyo instead of Jerusalem. And it will recreate the function with the relevant city. And it also will, for me, well, let's wait for the when it finishes. Done. So I can do copy now, copy the script. I can also insert that, add a cursor in my editor, or I can insert into terminal. Let's just replace the whole thing. And now we'll see the difference. The new hours, New York and Tokyo, 13 hours. But the great thing is I just asked to replace Jerusalem with Tokyo. I didn't add any country name or the time zone name. So it knew where in the code Jerusalem was, and it replaced that, also replacing the time zone name, which for me it's great because I don't have to think about this. Of course, I would proofread. For example, it might just change the name of the variables and some output, and then still leave the Israel time zone, which wouldn't be ideal. But in this case, it worked greatly. Awesome. The other macro you can have is the file. So you don't have to open the file. Let's say you have a PowerShell module with hundreds of functions, and you know the name of the function of the file. And if you type hash file, it will allow you to pick the file to refer that file, and then ask, for example, add new test scenario, if that's even possible. It doesn't matter in this case, but yeah, it will create a new proposal, and I don't have any pester test open here, but that file is a pester test, set of pester tests for my function is prime, and it will propose another test where I can grab that test and we'll add this to my file. Awesome. So that's it. One more bit before we leave Copilot. Just where is it here? GitHub Codespaces is a great option as well in the browser. So it's in virtual environment in your browser, and you can have let's go here. You can have like a virtual place to write your code or test your code, and also it's like a virtual Visual Studio Code, and you can use the Copilot here. My session got restarted, so it took me too long to present the previous part. Yes, it's loading now. So this was recreated from DBA Tools repo. If you go to the code spaces, you can create a new code space, select repository. I have a fork of the DBA Tools, so you can pick the DBA Tools, and they have this code space functionality in the repo, so you can recreate the code space based on that repo if you want to work with DBA Tools, for example, and it will create a new code space for you. So in my case, that's the code space, and I have a chat, Copilot chat here, and I have not GitHub, what I'm typing, Copilot. And you have the Copilot chat and Copilot extension available for you in the browser. So if you have the code spaces and you don't want to use the desktop app and desktop environment, you have this option here. And with that, with the DBA Tools, you also can, you have the Docker image of the SQL Server. So you can use that to test your SQL Server work in a browser without you actually setting up anything on your laptop, on your desktop, on your virtual machine. It's all in the virtual space of code space from GitHub. So that's something to just wanted to mention about that. You are not limited to your physical machine. Now, a few words about the other Copilot, the Azure Copilot. It's a feature in preview. I think it was announced earlier this year at SQL Bits, at least in March. It's a AI-driven, as everything else, assistant for cloud development on the Azure platform. It's fully integrated with Azure, and it will help. There are two bits I want to show you. There's Azure Copilot from like infrastructure side, and Azure Copilot for let's say translation from natural language to SQL, T-SQL. So this is the part for SQL. You can ask the questions in natural language, and it will generate the T-SQL for you. I have few screenshots because the live demo from Azure sometimes is not working the way I want. So let's go to Azure. If it's not working, then we can go back to the slide. So let's see the Azure. There are two bits. Let me move my screen. When I'm in the portal, so you know, when I'm in the portal Azure, I have this button, Copilot. When I click this button, it will open a pane on the right-hand side. It says preview, so it's important to remember that it might have sometimes better, sometimes worse days. And you have a whole conversation here. So I'm just moving the screen. Similar to another chatbots, where you put your message, 500 characters. You have, I think, 15 requests in a conversation. You can have multiple conversations. I think you can change the conversation here. New chat, that is the conversation, and ask the question about Azure. So this was from the screenshot from the PowerPoint. We can ask suggestions. We can ask questions about design, operation, optimization, or troubleshooting. And then you can also ask the questions about your environment. So my question was, what Azure SQL servers do I have? I have one, and the answer here, I have two-part answer. This is the first screen with the custom query, and then there is the answer in the usual manner. You have one instance of Azure SQL Server. This is the name. With the script, this is what I like probably the most from that option, where it's because we are working with the Azure, we are working with the scripting as well. So it generates that script, and you can run that script and then potentially save it or adjust or add to your documentation. So you don't always have to ask the Copilot for this kind of information. And when you run this query, you will get, this is my SQL Server, Azure SQL Server. We can also go another question. What Azure SQL databases do I have? So I have 3 on this Azure SQL Server instance. And also I have, well, 3 and the master, the forgotten one. And you can see the 3 user Azure SQL databases. And I also have the query. What I would like to see, we can have multiple queries in this window, which is great when you are working with that. But when I click this button with this query, the previous query is gone. And now we have new query with the results, which is great, but it would be even better if that query was added as a new tab, so I don't lose the other query, because I have to go now to this response, click that, get the query back. I have this query here, so I can still copy that, but I like tabs. You can see I have 5 tabs here. I just close all the hundreds of tabs in the other window. So I like tabs. So it would be nice to have all the tabs in one place and just switch between tabs and not going back to the responses of the Azure Copilot. The other question you can ask is like, what is the performance tier of my Azure SQL database? And it will give me some information. So this is my server details. And there are details about just one database, which is great, but it would be nice if it shows you the option to pick the database. I remember testing that a few months ago, and when I asked the questions like that, and there were multiple Azure SQL databases, I got a pop-up window asking which database you want to use. And I could pick one of the 3 databases I have, click one, and then I got the answers about that specific database. It just picked the one database here. The other type of questions you can ask are general. So it doesn't have to be specifically for your environment. It will be like, what are the available performance tiers in Azure SQL database? And it will give you the information from the documentation. So you don't even have to go outside to get these details. You can get them within the Azure Copilot. It also makes sense because that was 4th question out of 15. If you really want to ask the Copilot this question, maybe just use a Bing or another search engine, because this is generic question and publicly available, doesn't relate to your environment. But if you want to ask the questions like, do I have any active connections? Probably if you go to Bing or Google, there will be no answer, because they should not know about your connections to your environment. But in Azure Copilot, you will have the answer. This is the server database, number of connections, 1, who's connected, when, and what they were doing. You can also ask the questions about query executions, And in this case, we get the T-SQL query. We can try to click here. Let me open the new link. If that works. That didn't work. Yes, I need to connect to Azure SQL database with the regular query. And then I can run this query. It doesn't return anything, which is, yeah, it might finish the other query that was running. So it's empty, but it again shows me the T-SQL query, and I can switch to the SQL query editor in Azure and run this, so I don't have to copy, paste, or move around the different tools if I don't have to. This again is the question about the connections, and that bit was just a test. Actually, that question is one of the recommended questions. So you can see at the bottom of the chat, there are these bubbles. These are suggested questions, like how can I optimize the performance of my Azure SQL database? Can you show me the query execution plan for a specific query? And one of the questions was the one with the graphical execution plan. So it doesn't actually show me anything in Azure portal. It just tells me, go to Management Studio and do your thing. Probably it's tired of me asking these silly questions. So that's the Azure Copilot side from, let's say, infrastructure bit. And let's close this one. When we are in this editor, in the SQL, in the query editor for the T-SQL, you have this option here, Open Copilot. I will just, I will just switch to different database because this one is not very exciting. So let's close this one. Number 103. For the Copilot to work, I'm using the Entra authentication, not the SQL Server authentication. And I have more tables. That's a sample database from Microsoft. Oh, just move this window here. So let's close this pane and wow, just a new query. Oh, interesting. Because I'm showing the tables, probably that's why. Yeah, that was too wide. So now I can open Copilot and ask the questions. And I have some questions prepared. So let me put that on a side. I can ask the questions like count number of customers per state, province, and country. And I'm not showing, well, I can show you the tables. Oh, this is white. So I have address, customer address tables, and all these sorts different tables. And it will generate me a T-SQL query. At this point, I don't know if that's correct or not. I can run this query and see the results. And I see that the country, United Kingdom, and the region is England. And for United States, I have few other regions, like the different states, and the same for Canada. And you can ask all different questions, and we can play with that. Sometimes trick the Copilot to give you odd stuff. It's not, from my experience, not as great as the other Copilot, but it is helpful. It's good to have this inside the portal to quickly help with some queries. It's also recommended to use the tables that are relevant to the query. So if you have a query about sales, you might not need the tables for error log and build version, or maybe you don't need the product model or product description or anything like that. If you are concerned about the sales, so you have like sales order detail, and then at the bottom you have other sales table, order header, and stuff like that. So it's recommended to just focus on the tables you know they contain the information relevant to the query. It would probably be the same with the if you are opening the database and you just go to the tables, you know, at least from the documentation, like these 5 tables are related to this area of the business, so go there. But you don't have to ask questions about just T-SQL. You can also ask the question about the technical stuff, like change the compatibility level to 150. So it doesn't have to be just querying. And we can have this generated. So now, if the database compatibility level is not 150, you can change that to 150. I didn't provide the database name, and it didn't recognize the database name from this context. So it can recognize the tables, but for some reason it didn't recognize the database. Maybe that's level too high for that functionality to work properly. But the code is generic, but you can create that inside the Azure SQL Copilot. I think that's the proper name for that feature. Yeah. So as I said, from my experience, sometimes it's flaky with trying to find the information or querying the data. It probably it's worth to maybe use Copilot, GitHub Copilot, to help with querying. You can get the schema of the tables, just the schema and all the relations between the tables, and you will get all the columns, and then ask Copilot to work out the queries, because you can have the schema as a file and then refer to that file and ask the natural language questions to create the T-SQL and compare. I had a mixed experience with that. Sometimes ChatGPT with the provided schema worked better than the Azure SQL Copilot, but it was a few months ago, so it's worth experimenting and testing. But this functionality is there. So we can skip the screenshots. Those are the questions. So the main differences between these two, the GitHub Copilot, it's mainly for coding, and it doesn't apply only to to one language. As you've seen, I was working with PowerShell. It will help you with Python, probably even better, as Python is quite popular. And I use that for Google Scripts or HTML, PHP, and other popular languages. Maybe it's worth experimenting with other niche languages, but yeah, it's general coding. For Azure Copilot and Azure SQL Copilot, it's either the Custo language or T-SQL or SQL related queries. The GitHub Copilot is integrated with GitHub and Azure Data Studio, where you have these extensions and you can work with that, or the code spaces, which is again on GitHub. And the Azure Copilot is fully in the portal, so it's there in Azure portal. One is for coding, for explaining code, for code efficiency. The other one maybe to get some information about infrastructure underlying objects in Azure, or the SQL bit to translate natural language to T-SQL. And it depends what you are working with. If you are working more with code, probably GitHub Copilot is the tool to go. If it's more Azure stuff or SQL stuff, go to either Azure Copilot or Azure SQL Copilot. You can have database on-prem, and then if you just upload that schema or create the database, Azure SQL database, with just schema, you don't have the data. You can recreate the queries in Azure and just apply them in on-prem environment and see and test if that is working for you. And as a conclusion of this session, this presentation, we have multiple options for AI software to help us with different things. I'm part of one of the Facebook group of AI tools for stuff, just as a curiosity. And there is usually a question like, oh, I need to do something with AI to today it was to get photo of roof, not a roof. I provide the address and it will calculate the surface of the roof. So I can calculate, I think it was like solar panels or something. And people were posting links to different solutions, different tools. And it was like, oh my God, that's wow, so many different tools. And someone wanted to create a song based on something. And it was just lots of different links. So some of them might be just for fun, but that's what we have ahead of us, or even now, lots of stuff using large language models or other AI related things. And if you have the opportunity, I encourage you to use at least GitHub Copilot. If you are using the free version of another tool, that's great. If you can afford, try GitHub Copilot, because it helps and just helps you to understand. And it's like this very patient friend where you ask them questions about silly things about my code. They don't get angry. Sometimes they might hang or they disconnect you if you don't have network connections, but they will be patient with you. So just ask the questions, repeat the questions, ask them to explain, and it works nicely. Sometimes they go into the loop, the Copilot goes into loop, but maybe change the context, restart, and try again. And yeah, like like I said at the beginning, we have lots of Copilots in almost every app, every device now. So that's what is now, and in the future we will have every appliance probably at home now will be thinking about, you just woke up, so I know what you want to eat for breakfast, so I just made this for you.
I love it.
Yeah, so I don't see any questions. Wait, no, I don't see any questions in the chat, but if you are yeah, if you're curious about something, just ask now.
Yeah, so I really, as as the data platform is really starting to evolve and everything, we're starting to see people who maybe we only knew T-SQL for a bit, or we only knew this one thing for, these two things for a bit. We're beginning to see like job responsibilities really, really expand. So when I think you'll see a lot of data professionals transitioning into like, oh, I've got to figure out how to do this in Azure, or I may need to do this, Spark script or something. So this is going to be a game changer for people that may have to, enter that transition world that I think we all eventually will. So really great stuff. I appreciate you speaking for us today. I'm particularly going to be playing with that generate docs things because like most IT professionals, I can't stand making documentation, but I know I have to. So in fact, I
Yeah,
was just talking about that this morning.
that was my experience from sometimes from open source projects or PowerShell modules mostly,
Yeah,
but some other tools. It's like you have the code and the creator focus on the code, like working code, but because they do this as a hobby, probably they don't have time to document everything, and over
right.
time it just drifts away. And when you just pick up that tool, it's like, oh, I want to use that, but I don't know how. And now
Yeah.
we can either contribute if that's open source and generate that code, those documentations. So this is great.
Really great stuff. So besides the generate documents, what's another way you see, us being able to convince employers to include this as part of, our tool set?
I will start with the challenge because the probably the biggest challenge is the I is it IP the when there is a software company, they don't
Mhm.
really want to share that with anyone outside. So the trust here would be really hard to get when there's a company saying, like, let's say Microsoft, we have this GitHub Copilot. Now
Mhm.
you can use that code with us, and not the code, but you can put the code, we can fix it for you, or you can get this fancy stuff. But then there's a question if that code is actually new, or if that was uh, someone's um, someone's code somewhere, and do we
Sure.
break any law then? So that is the probably the biggest challenge to overcome, and to make sure we we have all the um, arrangements with the companies. So but other than that, yes, the productivity or understanding. So my example is like when I get the inherit the code from someone who's no longer there, and trying to decode that, it might take
Yeah.
uh, days,
Forever. Oh my God.
months
So
to
long.
do something like that. And when you have the option to ask someone who has no emotions or has unlimited time, like Copilot, it will just try to improve that. And it makes sense for the teams, because otherwise you end up with a kind of a black box code. I have friends who told me, like, it's kind of like a horror stories years ago, when they created a script that was running, let's say some scheduling thing, and they just left the company. And 5 years later, they went for lunch with someone with former employees, and the former employees said, like, "Oh, we still use your code because no one knows how to change
Yeah.
that." And
Yeah.
it's
It's
like
very common, actually.
I had at least two cases like that with different companies, and people say, "Yeah, they just use the same code because everyone is scared to touch it." And with the copilots, it might be easier to break that barrier,
Yeah.
to
That's a really
just
good
ask the
point.
questions, and maybe we can work it out. Because so one of the examples that was really silly, I changed the script and it started breaking. And the script, that was I changed the way I exported some Excel, some data to Excel spreadsheet. That was a very convoluted process, but we had a database, Oracle database, and the data were extracted by a query, saved as an Excel file, and we had to include there was a SQL tab which included the query. No one needed that tab, but it was there in the code. So I thought, when I picked up the process, we don't need that tab, and I sent that file to other team, and they said, "Oh, our VBA script is failing. Like, why is it failing? We don't know." And that VBA script had a step to remove that SQL tab, which I removed
Ah,
before. And so so it was like, yeah, so you create that tab, but then you remove that in VBA. But no one knew how
yeah.
to work with that, and everyone was scared. So in this case, go to one of these tools, ask them how to fix that, because we have this issue. So Yeah,
Excellent.
at least
Really
that's
great
my
stuff.
experience, and it works
Yeah,
great.
no, really, really great stuff. I'm sure that we'll be looking more into this, more people as we go on and on and on, because it's it's a brand new world. So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
definitely.
We really appreciate you coming and speaking for us, and we hope you'll join us again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks. I know it's nighttime for you, probably.
Almost, yes.
And I know we've got a little bit over, so I will say goodbye to the group, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.